Welcome to Landscape Photo Editing Sessions. I'm Rayate Arcuri. In this episode, I'm going to be editing a waterfall seascape that I shot in Kona, Hawaii. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to be editing in Lightroom, and the first thing I'm going to do is remove the distortion. I'm not going to remove any of the vignetting, and also remove the chromatic aberration. Alright. So what I want to do to this is lift up the shadows to get more detail in the dark areas, reduce the highlights, and also bring out more detail in the waterfalls. So in these here. Alright, so I'm going to reduce the highlights to around -60. I'm going to increase the shadows slightly just to around 30. I'm also going to increase the blacks to get more of the darker parts. And then I'm going to increase the vibrance to 40. And then I'm going to make this a bit warmer. And just a little bit less magenta. Alright, so that's all I'm going to do in Lightroom. Now I want to bring it in Photoshop. For this photo, I was actually able to get a good dynamic range within one exposure because the sun wasn't too bright in the sky over here, and I didn't get any blown out highlights. So I'm doing this all in a single exposure, but I'm still going to use luminosity mask so that I can selectively adjust the bright areas like the sky and the dark areas like in the rocks. So I'm using a plugin called Raya Pro, and I'm going to create luminosity mask. I'm also going to create special extra bright contrast luminosity mask and extra dark ones. I'm going to go to my channels and selecting my midtones. I'm going to select Midtones 2. Pressing Ctrl and clicking on the thumbnail, I can get that selection, and then I'm going to create a curve adjustment layer. With this curve adjustment layer, I'm going to increase the contrast in the sky. So I want to adjust the curve over here. I'm going to go to my targeted adjustment tool and go to a bright area of the sky and lift that up, and then go to a dark area of the sky and then bring that down. Because this is a midtones mask, I'm not actually affecting the brightest areas or the darkest areas. So these bright areas won't be brightened, while the darker areas won't be as affected as much. So as you can see, that's a big difference. It increases the contrast, makes it look a lot better, increases the saturation, and it makes it look natural. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is make sure I don't get any of these. I want to mask out the foreground, so that's what I want to do. Before that, I'm going to just crop it real fast, straighten it. Alright. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is mask out the foreground. And I'm going to do that by creating a group. So I'm going to select the layer. I want to create a foreground layer mask and then create that group and make a layer mask on the group. I'm going to go to my gradient tool, and I'm just going to make a short gradient going from the foreground to the sky, so that only the sky will be affected, and these rocks are still going to be affected over here. So I'm going to go to my channels, I'm going to go to my really dark masks, find a good one, so it looks like Darks 5 will do it. I'm going to press Control, click on the thumbnail, select my mask. I'm going to press Control H to hide the selection. Press Alt, click on the layer mask thumbnail, and then go to my brush tool and select a dark brush and then mask those rocks out. So I'm going to go over a few passes just to make sure it's good. Alright, there we go. So I got a good selection of the sky. It looks natural and only just a little bit part of the ocean right there. And the horizon is going to be affected and it still looks natural. Alright, next thing I want to do is bring out the contrast of the waterfalls over here. So I'm going to create, make sure to deselect, so Control D, and then I'm going to create a curve adjustment. I'm going to go to my targeted adjustment tool and find a bright area of the waterfall and bring that way up. Find a dark area of the water. Look over here, bring that down. Alright, so that's a huge difference and it makes it look a lot better. Alright, I'm going to press Control I on this mask and then just use a gradient just so that it's in the foreground. And I don't want this curve adjustment to affect the dark areas, so I'm going to go to a darks mask. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and select darks 3. And I'm going to apply that to the layer mask multiple times. So using a black color, I'm going to press Alt and Delete to fill the selection. And I'm going to fill that multiple times. Alright, so now the darks aren't being affected. I'm going to go ahead and mask out some of the areas that are still being affected. So like the waterfalls over here. Whoops. Alright. It's a little bit too bright over there, so I'm just going to reduce the opacity of my brush and then mask out some of the water over here. Alright, there, that looks good. The next thing I want to do is bring out even more detail in the sky, so I want to reduce the bright areas of the sky. So I'm going to go to my channels. I'm going to go to I'm just going to go to my regular bright channels. Brights 3 looks good. I'm going to create a curve adjustment. And then I'm going to go to my targeted adjustment tool, go to the bright area and bring that down a little bit. Go to my midtones area and then just bring that back up. Alright, so that's a subtle difference and it's kind of reducing the brightness of the bright area over here, and it also increases the saturation of those bright areas. The next thing I want to do is increase the contrast of the overall image a little bit. So I'm going to create a curve adjustment. I'm going to go over here to a bright area and just bring it just a little bit up, and then go to a dark area and bring it down just a little bit. So I'm just going to choose an area in the clouds. So just a little bit. And then I'm gonna go to the very dark area, like in the rocks over here, and then just bring that back up so that they aren't darkened too much. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. And I want to bring out more detail or make the waterfalls pop a little bit more, those streams of water. So I'm going to create a dodge and burn layer. So I'm just going to create a new layer, set it to soft light. Alright, and then go to my brush tool using a regular white or black. I'm going to lower the opacity to 10%. Using a white brush, I'm going to brush along the bright areas of the streams to make them brighter. Next thing I'm going to do is change it to a black brush and then paint the darker areas. So it's making the streams of water stand out more. Alright, let's check that out. So big difference, and it pulls your eyes into the middle over here. So those waterfalls. So the dodge and burn layer really improves the contrast and makes those streams of water stand out. The next thing I want to do is adjust the color. So I'm going to create a curve adjustment layer. I'm going to change the blending mode to color. So what I want to do to the color is I want to bring up the blues and the shadows. So I'm going to go to my blue channel. I'm going to go to the bottom and then bring that up a little bit. I'm going to go to my highlights or the top over here and bring that down. So that'll reduce the blue part in the sky. And then I want to go to my red channel and I want to bring out more reds in the shadow. And a little bit more in the sky. So this is bringing out more red in the shadows and the highlights. So all and midtones. So the whole range. Maybe just gonna set this back just a little bit. Alright. So I really like this color combination because it has the blue in the waterfall or in the water, and then red in the dark parts, so that's a color contrast. And I also more red in the sky. It kind of brings out some interesting colors in the clouds. I'm going to go to the blues and just bring out a little bit more blue. And there we go. In the shadows. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. And I like that color. So the next thing I want to do is add a glow effect. So I'm going to create a stamp layer of everything visible using Control Shift Alt and E. So that's going to create a duplicate layer of everything that's visible. I'm going to apply a Gaussian blur to it, so 20 is a good amount. I'm going to change the opacity to 15%. So depending on the amount of effect of the glow I want, I usually do it around 10 to 20%. I'm going to create a curve adjustment and clip it to the blurred layer using Alt and clicking between the two layers. I'm going to create a slight S curve to bring out more contrast. And there. So it makes a nice difference. It kind of bleeds the highlights and the shadows and creates kind of a soft effect. And finally, I want to add a vignette to pull the viewer's eye into the middle central frame of the image. So I'm just going to create a selection, oval selection, create a curve adjustment, and then bring that down to the amount I want the vignette to be. Then Control I, invert the mask, and then just go to the properties and feather it out a lot. Alright, so that looks good. And that's basically all. So let's go back to the original Lightroom edit, and that's a huge difference. So in the base Lightroom edit, I just wanted to bring out more shadows, reduce the highlights a little bit so that I can lift up and the contrast without darkening the shadows too much. So in this next group I have over here, it's just one midtones adjustment layer. And this is just for the sky to darken it and improve the contrast. The water layer mask over here selects the bright parts of the foreground and applies a large S curve to increase the contrast. This one just slightly reduces the bright areas of the sky. This one's an overall boost in contrast. This one's dodge and burn, so this brings out a lot of more detail in the streams of water. This next one changes the color of the image, the tones, and then this one is the glow effect, and then finally the vignette. Alright, if you found this video useful, please give it a like and comment and consider subscribing, and thanks for watching.